My mother doesn't want you here. That's what my husband told me. While we were standing at the entrance of a mansion I had secretly helped pay for. His mother's mansion. The grand inauguration party buzzed behind him. Laughter, clinking glasses, music drifting through the open doors. Expensive cars lined the driveway, photographers flashed their cameras, and I stood there in my best dress, clutching my tiny purse so hard my fingers hurt. I thought he was joking at first. Actually laughed. But his face stayed cold. No smile. No softening. Just those same words again, quieter this time, like he was ashamed to be seen with me. My mother doesn't want you here, Emma. It's better if you leave. In that second the air felt heavy. My ears rang. The mansion lights blurred. I watched a group of people step past us, greeting my mother-in-law with hugs and kisses while I stood outside like some uninvited stranger. His mother's eyes met mine across the entrance hall for a split second. There was no warmth, no welcome, just a sharp, satisfied little smile as she turned away, as if to say, "See, told you, you don't belong." And my husband, my partner, the man who promised to stand by me, was choosing her. Over me. Over us. Something inside me cracked that night, but something else silently woke up too. A quiet, steady, burning part of me that whispered, "You will not let them erase you. Not after everything you've done. Not after everything you've given." That night, outside the mansion I helped build, I started planning a different future. A future where I didn't beg to be chosen. A future where the truth, my truth, would finally be heard. I wasn't born into their world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I grew up in a small apartment above my father's repair shop. My childhood sounded like tools clinking, radios playing old songs, my mother humming while she cooked. We didn't have much, but my parents had one rule. If you love someone, you stand beside them. Especially when others don't. I believed that. Maybe too much. I met Daniel at a company event. I was in finance, he was in management, and his last name meant something in that building long before he ever walked in. His mother, Evelyn, was a silent partner in more deals than people realized. I didn't know that at first. To me, he was just the charming guy who poured me a drink and actually listened when I talked. I still remember the way he looked at me back then, like I was the only one in the room. He'd say things like, "You're different, Emma. And you don't care about money or status. That's what I love about you." Back then I wore those sentences like jewelry. When I finally met his mother, I understood the gap between our worlds immediately. She was the kind of woman who never raised her voice, just her eyebrow. She spoke softly, but her words always felt like little tests I was doomed to fail. At our first dinner she looked at my hands and said, "You don't have a French manicure. You must be very busy, or very practical." Sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. Over time the comments continued, always wrapped in politeness. "You're very honest, Emma. Our circles can find that uncomfortable. You cook yourself. How sweet." Daniel is used to chefs and staff, but I suppose change is interesting for him. "You're from a modest background. That can be grounding, or limiting, depending on how you look at it." Daniel would tell me to ignore her. "That's just how she is," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But she did. And I felt every needle. Still I tried. I folded myself smaller, smoothed out my accent when I spoke around her friends, wore dresses that she might approve of. I went out of my way to be kind, to be useful, to be easy. Then the mansion project began. Evelyn wanted a new property just outside the city. Statement home. Something grand. A place that reflects our family's success, she called it. But even rich people have limits, and her liquid cash was tied up in investments during a rough season. One night, when Daniel and I were lying in bed, he turned to me and said, "Babe, if we help Mom with this now, she'll never forget it. It's just a temporary transfer. We can move some of your savings, combine with mine. It's an investment in the family legacy. My savings. My inheritance from my father when he passed. Money I had guarded like a fragile piece of his love." I hesitated. He noticed. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked. And that question, that unfair, heavy question, broke down my careful walls. Course I trusted him. He was my husband, the man I chose, the man who promised we were building a life together. So we moved the money. Quietly. No big contract. No paper trail naming me as anything. Just trust. Just love. Just a belief that one day when we walked through that mansion it would feel like ours too. I had no idea then that the house I helped them build would become the stage where they tried to push me out of their story completely. From the moment construction started, I saw a different side of Evelyn. She called it our family project, but every time she said our, I noticed she wasn't really including me. It was her name on every document, her initials on the floor plans, her monogram on the towels she ordered months before the mansion was even finished. Still, I was there. I went to site meetings. I looked over numbers. I stayed up late checking finances to make sure we weren't overextending. "Are you sure this is safe?" I asked Daniel one evening as we sat at the kitchen table surrounded by invoices. He didn't even look up from his phone. "It's fine, Em. Mom always lands on her feet. And when all this is done, we'll be living in a world you've only dreamed of." That sentence stung for some reason. A world I'd only dreamed of. As if he'd always belonged in it and I was the one reaching. I began to notice small behaviors that made me uneasy. The way he answered his phone and stepped out of the room every time his mother called. The way conversations suddenly stopped when I walked into certain family gatherings. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and heard Evelyn on speaker, not realizing I could hear every word. "It's just not appropriate, Daniel. This house represents our legacy. She doesn't understand our world. She doesn't fit the image we're trying to project." My chest tightened. She said. "Not Emma. Not your wife." Daniel sighed. "Mom, I can't just cut her out." "You don't have to cut her out," his mother replied smoothly. "Just keep boundaries. Some events are family only." I remember standing there, frozen, my hand still on the doorknob. Family only. And yet I was the one she wanted out. When Daniel noticed me, his face flushed with guilt. "How long have you been standing there?" he asked. "Long enough," I said quietly. We argued that night. Not the kind of loud argument that ends in slammed doors, but a slow, painful one where every word felt like stepping on glass. "She doesn't mean it the way you think," he insisted. "She literally said I don't belong in your legacy," I answered. "You're twisting her words." "I heard them, Daniel. She's just under pressure. The mansion is a big deal. And I'm not." The silence after that question was louder than any shout. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew like a crack in a window, spreading quietly but steadily. Little moments piled up. Invitations to family dinners that mysteriously got lost, until the last minute. Group photos where Evelyn gently moved me to the side, out of frame. Conversation topics about old money families, and knowing your place in certain rooms. Each time I swallowed my hurt. I told myself it would change once the mansion was done. Once Evelyn saw how loyal and supportive I'd been. Once she realized I was not trying to take anything away. I was trying to be part of it. But people who need to feel superior rarely welcome those they can't control. And the closer we got to the mansion inauguration, the more obvious it became that I was not being prepared as a guest of honor, but as an unwanted shadow they were hoping would simply stay away. The night of the inauguration was supposed to be a celebration. I remember getting ready with shaking hands. I chose a simple but elegant black dress, the one Daniel had once called his favorite. I did my hair in loose waves, put on the necklace my father bought me on my graduation day, and stood in front of the mirror, talking to my reflection like she was a nervous friend. "You belong there," I whispered. "You contributed. You supported. You are his wife." Daniel was quieter than usual as we drove to the mansion. He adjusted his tie again and again, glanced at his phone more times than seemed normal, and barely met my eyes. "Are you okay?" "Yes. Yeah. Just a big night," he said. When we turned into the long driveway, I felt small. The mansion glowed against the night sky, huge and proud, with perfectly manicured lawns, marble steps, and a red carpet leading up to the entrance. Guests in designer clothes stepped out of luxury cars. A photographer snapped photos under a branded backdrop with Evelyn's name elegantly printed above, Mansion Inauguration. I looked up at the building and whispered, "Wow." For a moment I felt proud. I had seen the early plans, the raw concrete, the empty rooms. Now here it was, finished, shining, alive. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you, before we go in." The way he said it made my skin prickle. "Okay," I replied slowly. He didn't look at me. He stared at the mansion instead, jaw tight. "My mother doesn't want you here tonight." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. "That's not funny." His eyes finally met mine. There was no joke in them, only fear, and something like embarrassment. "I'm serious," he said. "She thinks tonight should be family only. Investors, important people. She doesn't want any distractions." Distractions. That's what I was now. My voice was barely a whisper. "I'm your wife." "I know," he said quickly. "I know." And I argued with her. I really did. But she's under a lot of pressure. Press is here. Big partners are inside. She thinks it's better if you sit this one out. What am I supposed to do? Ask, my throat tight. Go home. While you stand next to her and pretend I don't exist. Just for tonight, he said. Please. Don't make a scene. We can talk about it later. Don't make a scene. Not, this is wrong. Not, if my wife isn't welcome, I'm not going in either. He adjusted his cuffs like the conversation was a minor inconvenience, then stepped out of the car. A valet opened my door too, but I couldn't move. From where I sat, I watched him straighten his jacket and walk toward the entrance. Evelyn was waiting there, radiant in a silver gown, greeting guests like royalty. When she saw me still in the car, she tilted her head slightly, then turned back to her crowd. A security guard hovered near the doorway, glancing between me and a guest list. It hit me like a wave then. They had planned this. The "we don't want her here" wasn't last minute. This was arranged, accepted, normalized. I got out of the car slowly, my legs unsteady. I walked up to the steps, stopping just short of the red carpet. I could hear speeches starting inside, laughter bouncing off marble walls. Daniel turned back, saw me standing there, and hurried over. "Emma, please," he said under his breath. "Don't do this. Not here." "Do what?" "Ask." "Exist." His jaw clenched. "My mother doesn't want you here." There it was again. Those words. This time they didn't just sting, they burned. For a moment I considered begging, pleading, asking him to choose me. Asking him to remember the nights we stayed up worrying about bills while the mansion swallowed our savings. Asking if I meant so little that his mother's image mattered more than the woman who stood beside him before their marble floors even existed. But something stopped me. If I had to beg my own husband to see me, I had already lost more than one night. I stepped back from the entrance. "Don't worry," I said softly. "I won't make a scene." I turned around and walked away, my heart shattering with each step. He let me. He didn't run after me. He didn't call my name. And as I sat back in the car, tears finally falling, a thought pressed its way through the pain. They think they can humiliate me in silence. They think I'll just disappear. They have no idea what I know. They have no idea what I've kept quiet, for their sake. That night, on the drive home alone, I stopped being the begging wife. I started becoming something else. Revenge sounds harsh. But what I felt wasn't about hurting them for fun. It was about balance. About justice. About no longer letting my kindness be used as a weapon against me. 4 days after the inauguration, Daniel barely came home before midnight. When he did, he smelled like champagne and expensive cologne. He'd say the same tired line every time. "It's networking, Emma. Mom needs me. This is business." One night I finally asked, "Did anyone ask about me? Why I wasn't there. He hesitated just a second too long. People assumed you were sick, he said. Mom thought it was easier that way. Easier. Lying about me was easier. Did you correct them? Yes. Silence. His silence was my answer. After he fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room with my laptop open. Old emails, bank transfers, draft contracts, digital dust I had ignored for too long. I started digging. It wasn't hard to find, because I had done the work. I had pushed the transfers. I had managed the spreadsheets. I was the one who triple-checked everything. I found the wire records. My inheritance moving into a joint account. Then from that joint account into an entity under Evelyn's name. Not a family trust. Not something with both our names on it. Just hers. I found emails between Daniel and the project manager, where he wrote, "My wife will sign off on the temporary transfer. She doesn't need to be on the final ownership documents. This is for my mother. It's sensitive." I stared at those words until they blurred. He had planned it. Maybe he didn't start with bad intentions. Maybe he told himself it was for family. But at some point he chose convenience over honesty. Appearances over fairness. Buried in the emails, I also found something else. Discrepancies in invoices. Overcharges. Fake consulting fees paid to shell companies tied to Evelyn. Money moved in circles that never quite made sense if you looked too closely. Most people wouldn't look closely. But I wasn't most people. I printed everything. Every email. Every transfer. Every suspicious invoice. I organized them into folders. The more I dug, the less my heart hurt and the more my mind sharpened. They didn't just exclude me emotionally. They used me financially. I thought revenge would look like screaming in their faces. But as I sat there surrounded by paper proof, I realized. Real revenge would be calm. Legal. Controlled. The next week I met with a lawyer. Not one of their polished family attorneys. Someone completely outside their circle. Someone recommended by an old colleague who specialized in financial disputes and marital property. I placed the folder on his desk and told him everything. From the first, "Trust me," to the "My mother doesn't want you here." He skimmed the documents. His expression going from neutral to quietly focused. "This is a lot," he said. "Have you considered separation?" I swallowed hard. "I'm not here to cry about my marriage," I replied. "I'm here to find out what my rights are. I helped pay for that mansion. And they cut me out like I'm nothing." He nodded. "You're not nothing. And you're not powerless." We talked for hours. He explained how marital assets worked in our jurisdiction. He explained how paper trails could be followed, even when people thought they were hiding behind shell companies. He explained how judges looked at intent when money was moved without transparency. By the time I left his office, I had 3 things. Legal plan. A clear understanding that I was not crazy. And an appointment set for a formal action. If Daniel chose not to fix things voluntarily. But I decided something important. I would give him one last chance. Not a chance to talk his way out with sweet words. Chance to tell the truth. A chance to stand with me instead of behind his mother. I invited him to dinner at home. Just us. No accusations yet. No yelling. I cooked his favorite meal not because he deserved it, but because I needed the calm. Halfway through the meal, I put my fork down and said, "Daniel, we need to talk about the mansion. And about my inheritance." He stiffened. Don't start this again." "I'm not starting anything," I replied. "I'm finishing it." I told him everything I knew. The transfers. The invoices. The email where he told the project manager I didn't need to be on the documents. I watched the color drain from his face. "I trusted you," I said quietly. "I stood by you. I believed you when you said this was for our future. But you didn't build a future with me, did you? You built your mother a kingdom. With my father's money." He buried his face in his hands. "You don't understand how much pressure she puts on me," he muttered. "She said this was the only way." "I don't care what she said," I interrupted. You are my husband. You had a choice. When he finally looked up, he didn't apologize. He negotiated. Look, he said, the mansion is already in her name. Changing it now would be a nightmare. But I can talk to her. Maybe she can give you something back, a gesture, some money. Gesture. That was the moment something inside me quietly closed. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I told him. If you don't fix this the right way, this won't just be a family disagreement. It will be a legal problem. And your mother's pristine reputation won't look so pristine anymore when people start asking questions about those invoices. His eyes widened. You wouldn't. I met his gaze steadily. I would. That was the beginning of the real revenge. Not shouting. Not throwing things. Just calmly turning their own paperwork into the one thing they couldn't control. Evidence. It's almost poetic that the truth finally cracked open inside the same mansion where I was once told I wasn't wanted. A few weeks after our confrontation, Evelyn invited both of us over for a civilized conversation. The message came through Daniel. Mom wants to clear the air, he said. She thinks this has all been a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. A misunderstanding. Still, I agreed to go. Not because I believed her intentions were pure, but because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't walking in as the timid daughter-in-law anymore. I was walking in with facts. When we arrived that evening, the mansion looked different to me. Less impressive. More like a very expensive cage they thought they'd locked me out of. Evelyn greeted us in the grand sitting room, where everything was white, gold, and perfectly arranged. She poured herself a glass of wine and gestured for us to sit. Emma, she began, her voice smooth. I'm sorry you felt unwelcome that night. That was never my intention. I tilted my head slightly. You specifically told Daniel you didn't want me there, I replied. Is that not correct? Her eyes flicked to him for a second. I simply meant that the inauguration was delicate. Lots of people from a certain circle. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. I almost admired the way she twisted everything into concern. I didn't feel uncomfortable, I said. I felt excluded. There's a difference. She sighed. Well, feelings are complicated. We can't change the past. But we can move forward. As a family. She used that word so easily, family. The same word she used to justify using me. I'd love that, I said. But before we move forward, we need to address something. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the glass table between us. She looked at it like it was something unpleasant that had crawled in from outside. What is this? She asked. It's the paper trail, I said. Of how my inheritance, money left to me by my father, was used to help fund this mansion. Without my name on anything. Without any legal protection. Her face remained calm, but her eyes sharpened. Emma, she said slowly, this house was built with my assets. My investments. Not yours. Partly, I replied. But not only. And I have the records to prove it. I opened the folder and slid a few pages toward her. Wire transfers, emails, payment orders. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside me. I was willing to let it go as a family matter, I said. Until you decided I didn't even deserve to be in the building I helped finance. Her mask slipped just a little. And what exactly do you want? She asked. I want recognition, I replied. Legal, documented recognition of my contribution. Either in the form of partial ownership or a formal, binding financial settlement. Not a gesture. Not a favor. You're threatening me, she said quietly. I'm informing you, I corrected. Because if we don't resolve this here, privately, then I will let the courts handle it. Along with those confusing invoices tied to shell companies. I'm sure auditors would be very interested. A flicker of real anger crossed her face. You little, she started, then caught herself. This is ungrateful. After everything I've allowed you into. Allowed me into. I repeated. I didn't ask for your world, Evelyn. Your son brought me into it. I gave years of my life, my support, my savings. And you still saw me as someone who could be erased when it suited you. The room was silent for a moment. The only sound was the faint ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Then I turned to Daniel. "This is your moment," I said softly. "Are you going to stand with me? Or with her?" He looked trapped, like a boy being forced to choose between parents in a divorce. But he wasn't a boy. He was a grown man. A husband. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "Mom, we should work something out." She's right. She did help. It wasn't the strong declaration I dreamed of. But it was something. Evelyn stared at him, betrayal flashing in her eyes. "You're taking her side over your own mother." "I'm not taking sides," he said weakly. "I'm trying to avoid a scandal. If this goes legal." So that was it. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. Their image. Their reputation. I realized then that I wouldn't get the kind of loyalty from him that I'd always given so freely. Still, I didn't back down. "This doesn't have to be ugly," I said. "We can sign an agreement. Quietly. No one else needs to know. Unless you want them to." For a long moment Evelyn said nothing. Then finally she exhaled. "What are your terms?" she asked. And just like that the power shifted. Not because I shouted. Not because I begged. Because I had done something they never expected. I valued myself. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Lawyers drafted documents. Meetings were held in offices instead of living rooms. Voices were calmer, colder. Numbers replaced emotional manipulation. In the end, we agreed on a settlement. It wasn't about greed. I didn't ask for half the mansion or to carve my name into every stone. I asked for what was fair. My contribution returned with interest, plus a formal acknowledgement that the money had come from me. On paper, in black and white, there it was. My inheritance. Not a gift to Evelyn. Not a generous support from the family. My money. The day we signed the final papers, Evelyn's signature was tight, like her hand wanted to refuse, but the law didn't give it permission. "I hope you're satisfied," she said dryly. "I'm not satisfied," I replied honestly. "But I'm done being silent. As for my marriage," that was the harder part. One evening, after everything was finalized, Daniel and I sat on opposite sides of the living room, the space between us heavy with everything unsaid. "We can move past this," he said. "Start over. Build our own place one day. Just you and me." It should have sounded beautiful. Instead, it sounded like an empty promise from someone who had already shown me where I ranked on his list. "Daniel," I said quietly, "do you understand why this broke something in me?" "I know you're hurt," he replied. "It's more than hurt," I said. "It's clarity. The night at the mansion, you stood at the door and told me I wasn't wanted. You didn't defend me. You didn't say, 'If my wife isn't welcome, I'm not going in.' You just delivered your mother's message." He rubbed his face with his hands. "You don't know what it's like with her. The pressure." "You're right," I cut in. "I don't know. But I know what it's like to stand outside a door, dressed and ready, and be told I don't belong by the person I love." He looked at me, really looked at me, for perhaps the first time in months. "What do you want, Emma?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I want a life where I'm not constantly waiting to be chosen. I want a partner who doesn't need to be pushed into protecting me. I want peace. And I don't think I'll find that here. Not like this." He stared at the floor. "Are you saying you want to leave?" Tears welled in my eyes, but my voice stayed steady. "I think we lost something we can't get back," I said. "Trust. Respect. The belief that you'd stand beside me when it mattered." We didn't scream. There were no dramatic scenes, no broken dishes, no slammed doors. Just two people sitting in a quiet room, realizing their paths had slowly separated a long time ago, and this was simply the moment they finally looked up and noticed. The separation wasn't instant. Took time. Paperwork. Logistics. But each step I took toward my own apartment, my own bank account, my own life, felt like breathing again after holding my breath for years. I visited my father's grave one afternoon, long after I moved out. I stood there with flowers in my hands and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't protect your gift sooner. But I've learned now. I won't let anyone use my love or your memory against me again." The mansion still stands. They still host parties. Guests still walk up the marble steps and admire the view. But I no longer ache when I think of that place. Because I know something they can never change. They may have tried to shut me out of their house. But they will never again have the power to shut me out of my own life. Looking back, that night at the mansion wasn't just about being turned away from a party. It was a moment of revelation. When my husband said, "My mother doesn't want you here," he wasn't only delivering his mother's words. He was showing me, clearly and painfully, where I ranked in his world. We like to believe love is enough. That if we are patient, kind, understanding, people will eventually see our value. That loyalty will be rewarded. That sacrifice will be appreciated. But sometimes love alone isn't enough. Here's what I learned. If someone is always asking you to understand their bad behavior, but never trying to understand your pain, you are not in a partnership. You are in a performance. If you have to beg for a place in someone's family legacy, then it was never built with you in mind. You were just a convenient piece in their story, expected to support quietly. Money is not just numbers. Carries trust, memory, sacrifice. When someone uses your financial contributions but denies your presence, it's not just disrespectful. It's a form of erasure. Silence is not always noble. Sometimes speaking up calmly, clearly, and legally is the most powerful form of self-respect. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. In my case, it meant reclaiming what was mine, exposing the truth, and walking away with my dignity intact. I didn't burn their mansion down. I didn't destroy their lives. I simply refused to let them continue building their empire on the assumption that I would always stay quiet, always stay small, always stand outside the door. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like you were standing at the entrance of someone else's life, waiting to be let in, ask yourself, why am I waiting for a door that was never meant for me? You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to demand fairness. You are allowed to say, "If I'm not respected here, I will build my own place somewhere else." The night my husband told me, "My mother doesn't want you here," I thought my world was ending. Now I see it differently. That night wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life where I no longer begged to belong. Because I finally understood that I already did. To myself, "You said,